2D メトロイドの完全新作メトロイドドレッドをやっと発表できました。実はメトロイドドレッドのアイデアは15年ほど前に思いついたんですよ。
That's right, Metroid fans. Welcome back. We're going to be talking about Metroid Dread, Metroid Prime 4, and at the very end, we're going to be talking about new Switch hardware and what's going on with that. Of course, this is a Metroid-focused video, and things are very, very exciting right now in the world of Metroid. So this is going to be one of those multifaceted, longer videos. We're going to be talking about multiple subjects here, but we're going to cover them all in this video because I think each of them deserves to be in one video, and we'll discuss why as we progress. Timestamps will be in the description. But first of all, we're going to talk about the amazing, crazy announcement of Metroid Dread at Nintendo's E3 presentation 2021 on June 15th. Of course, there were a lot of rumors going around since Samus Returns was released in 2017. Immediately at the end of that year, I remember on Reddit and 4chan, there were already rumors that there were going to be another Metroid 2D game that was going to be released after that by the same team, Mercury Steam. That finally did happen now with Metroid Dread. However, Metroid Dread is one of those types of games that is basically shrouded in mystery or even never believed to really exist in the first place, even though it was chronicled in Metroid Prime 3 in a short little blurb when you did a scan in that game of the game existing. It was talked about through various websites that the game was in fact planned on the Nintendo DS as a sequel to Metroid Fusion, which came out on the Game Boy Advance in 2002. Many people assumed that Metroid Dread was completely cancelled and that would never see the light of day, and of course it was subtitled as basically Metroid 5, which is exactly what Metroid Dread is. Now when I first saw this at Nintendo's E3 presentation, guys, I have to be honest with you, I actually couldn't believe that this was really Metroid Dread. The fabled game that wasn't supposed to come out and never exist, but it did, and you know, here it was. It's one of those games that reminds me of the old days back on the Nintendo 64, like with Earthbound 64 that was never released, or that unreleased version of Dinosaur Planet which became Star Fox Adventures, and many other games like that that were shown or even talked about but then never released. And Star Fox 2 was one of them until they did finally release that game and finish it on the SNES Classic. They also had this game called Project Hammer on the Wii, which was never actually released still. And who knows, maybe Project Hammer will make a comeback in the future, but obviously that was a new IP. Nobody even knows about that game and probably forgot about it by now. But Metroid Dread was one of those types of games that was like that, in my opinion. It was a fabled, mysterious Metroid game that everyone was hoping to see at some point, but basically had given up on many, many years before. So now we have Metroid Dread that was revealed in Nintendo's Direct, and here we're going to talk about some details in the game that you may or may not know about, especially if you didn't watch the Treehouse Live. There's lots of information about the game and of course the story that we can talk about here, and it's all extremely interesting. And of course you're going to be seeing gameplay here as we talk about it from that Treehouse Live presentation. Metroid Dread is, like we said, a sequel to Metroid Fusion, but it's also very much like a sequel to Samus Returns from the Nintendo 3DS, because Mercury Steam was in fact the developer on that game, and they developed Metroid Dread as well. So there's a lot of similarities in how it looks. As far as the art style is concerned, you can tell it's from the same developer. Even how the doors are stylized and how the way Samus runs around through animations, it's very, very similar to Samus Returns on the Nintendo 3DS, which came out in 2017. However, as was pointed out in the Treehouse Live, there are some quality of life improvements to this game versus Samus Returns. Lots more movement abilities that Samus can do. So the moves that are returning and also the ones that are being improved upon we'll go over here. Samus of course can run and slide underneath small crevices or underneath barriers. She can do the wall jumping still, and the melee counter also makes a return from Samus Returns, which is basically like a parry move where you time your counter attack right when the enemy starts attacking themselves, and you'll do this melee counter attack to them. They also improved upon this mechanic by adding a dash melee combat maneuver as well. So now you can run and also do a dash instead of just being limited to the melee counter attack. So this adds a lot more freedom of movement and attacking ability for Samus by being able to melee while dashing. And the free aim system as well does make a return, but they also improved upon that by giving you the ability to free aim while you run, which is something you couldn't do in Samus Returns. So now you have all these abilities that make the game a lot more fast-paced, and you have a lot more freedom of movement and fast movement than what you could in Samus Returns in Metroid Dread. And as the director of the game brought out in his development history video on Nintendo's YouTube channel, there's also some new abilities that are being added that they went over. Of course, they didn't talk about every single new ability or every single suit mechanic or every single power-up that you get, because you're going to find that out in the game. But they did add something called a Phantom Cloak and a Spider Magnet. And the Phantom Cloak is basically a stealth maneuver that you can turn on to hide yourself from the new enemies in the game called the Emmys, which is EMMI. These are robotic spider-like security droids that are trying to stalk you and basically hunt you to eliminate you from that area that you're inhabiting there in the game. And it was brought out that if you are actually attacked and caught by these Emmy, then that is actually an insta-kill. So it is the first time, I believe, in a Metroid game that they have introduced insta-kills. Basically a one-hit death. If you get caught by these, it's game over. But they said that there is a respawn system that, you know, brings you back relatively close to where you were, so it's really not that hard from what they were saying. However, that does add a certain type of dread, quote-unquote, as the game's title brings out, to the experience. But there is a way to counteract those Emmy robots if you use the Omega Cannon that you can actually get powered up from your own arm cannon on your suit. And they showed that you can actually take energy from certain biomechanical units that you find in the game that have biological life and mechanical life in them. You power up your arm and you can have a limited amount of bullets or shots for this Omega Cannon you can use. And those actually can apparently destroy or damage these Emmy security robots. But getting back to Samus's new abilities, they also have a Spider Magnet, which is basically like using the spider ball that you could in Metroid Prime, but without being the ball. You can crawl with your hands and your legs on the walls using the Spider Magnet. So that is a really cool new addition they also added to the game as well. And they talked about how Samus now can talk to her ship. Apparently her ship has an AI which can talk to her, and in Metroid Prime 3 there was an AI that talked to you as well, but it wasn't quite as robust basically as apparently this AI will be in Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread, her AI is called Adam, and Adam will give little hints about, you know, certain information about the lore or the enemies or the area that you're in the game. But in the presentation, they did hide a lot of what Adam was doing with Samus there, and they kind of skipped it. So it remains to be seen exactly all the things that Adam can do for Samus. My guess is that possibly this ship AI will be able to give Samus some other power-ups as well that we will have to wait and see when we actually play the game in October. And it was brought out that this ends the story arc between Samus and the Metroids. So if they do continue the Metroid series beyond this in terms of the timeline, then the next game might not even be titled Metroid, it might be titled Samus quote-unquote something something. But on Nintendo's website there is a brief overview of this story. It basically talks about that the story continues after the events of Metroid Fusion, and Samus then goes and descends upon planet ZDR to investigate a mysterious transmission sent to the Galactic Federation. And it brings out how this planet is now overrun by alien life forms and very dangerous mechanical robots. And these EMMI robots were once DNA extracting research machines, but they are now programmed to hunt Samus. And this creates a very tense and of course dark atmosphere. And as they showed in the trailer and the gameplay, it is a very dark game and the music is very tense and atmospheric. So this is definitely going to be a game that makes you feel isolated and trapped, and that you're always on the run and there's always danger or dread, like it says, behind you, which is really cool because I really like that aspect of Metroid, that dark aspect, and flirting with the idea of sci-fi horror in a Metroid game is a very interesting concept that I hope they do explore further in Metroid Prime 4, which we talked about in previous videos. And another thing we should talk about is Samus's suit in Metroid Dread. Now, this takes place directly after the events of Metroid Fusion, and if you played Metroid Fusion, you'll know that Samus's suit looks similar but quite a bit different at the same time than the suit she's wearing in Metroid Dread that they show here. Now, in the Treehouse Live, they did reveal that you will find out what happened to make Samus's suit look like it does in Metroid Dread. So even though it doesn't look exactly the same like Metroid Fusion, there is an explanation as to why it looks the way it does for Samus in Metroid Dread. And of course, you are losing all your powers again as you start the game. They brought that out that one of the first power-ups you get is the Charge Beam, which is very common in Metroid games. They seem to always find a way to have Samus lose all her powers. My guess, of course, is that she crash lands on this planet ZDR and she loses all her powers in that sense. Or there's some type of interference when she lands on the planet from all the machines that are there that are programmed to destroy Samus. Most likely that has something to do with why Samus loses all of her powers in this particular Metroid game. They always find a way to do that, of course, so you can find all your items and become more powerful as you progress through the game. That's something that I always try to do in a Metroid game, is I try to find the tried and true standard abilities pretty quickly. Then you can get on to finding the new abilities and the new beams that are introduced. However, I do want to bring out something about this suit, of course, because they don't explain it in the treehouse or the trailers or anything like that. There's no explanation that I've noticed at all, but the suit is very interesting because if you take a look at Metroid Fusion's suit for Samus, it is partly organic. There's some like organic part of that suit, of course, which has something to do with the story. And in other Metroid games and other Metroid Prime games, the suit wasn't really an organic life form type of suit. A little bit maybe in Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime 3 because of the Phazon that was injected or infected basically with Samus in those games. But the suits themselves didn't really manifest any type of organic life looking object or material about them. Now, if we look close at Metroid Dread's suit for Samus, it does look like there's something organic about the suit. If you look at the Morph Ball, for instance, it does look like there's some type of organic skin material that is not obviously human that is on this suit that is powering it for Samus, quite possibly. That's just a guess, we don't know, but it will be explained from what they say when we play the game. But it is something to be noticed that it does appear that quite possibly this suit that Samus is wearing is partly organic and partly mechanical, and they did bring out that you are gaining power from these bio, which is a life form, mixed with mechanical objects to power your cannon to make that Omega cannon. So if Samus's suit does have some type of bio organic life attached to it, that could be one explanation as to why you can gain power from other organic biomechanical life forms with a suit that has a similar type of design. But that is very, very interesting. Something that I noticed there, that the suit does look like it has some type of organic life attached to it. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what that does. I think the game looks fantastic, has really nice art style, really nice, smooth, clean graphics, and very atmospheric. So I do think this is one of the best looking Switch games there is right now. Even though it's a 2D game, I do think is definitely a very strong contender for one of the best looking games on the Nintendo Switch. So what about Metroid Prime 4 though, right? We were really hoping we would have a trailer there at E3. Of course, that didn't happen. However, Metroid Prime 4 was in fact there at E3, in that Nintendo talked about Metroid Prime 4 in that Nintendo E3 Direct 2021, because everyone, of course, who's been following this channel and our coverage of Metroid Prime 4 and the development of it was really hoping we would get an update on how it was going from Nintendo themselves, not from me, not from other YouTubers, but from Nintendo. So they finally talked about Metroid Prime 4 before they introduced Metroid Dread, and of course the news was good. They said they are working hard on Metroid Prime 4, but even though they weren't going to show the game there in that Direct, they did go ahead and show us this Metroid Dread, which means that Nintendo did basically confirm that all the covers that I've been going through on this channel for Metroid Prime 4 is in fact correct. Metroid Prime 4 is in very deep development and things are going very well for the game, and it doesn't look like there's any hiccups or any kind of issues with the game at all. In my last Metroid Prime 4 video, we talked about Metro Studios was not actually hiring anybody else for the development of Metroid Prime 4 at that time. It looks like they had everything in order and they're just going full steam ahead, ready to show that game, quite possibly on new Switch hardware, which is what we're going to talk about next. All these things are free-flowing and connecting. Metroid Prime 4 is a cutting-edge game being made by Retro Studios. As we've talked about countless times on this channel, Retro Studios refers to themselves as a state-of-the-art game development studio working in conjunction with Nintendo to bring award-winning games, which would be Metroid Prime, right? Metroid Prime 4, to Nintendo's cutting-edge next-generation platforms. So, Nintendo's heavily rumored new Nintendo Switch, which has in fact been referred to by other publications from 2019 to 2020 to 2021 as a next-generation full model upgrade to the Nintendo Switch. And, of course, Bloomberg reported that Nintendo may reveal this new Switch before E3. They didn't say for sure they would. They said Nintendo may reveal that new Nintendo Switch hardware before E3 started to get AAA third parties the opportunity to introduce their games for the platform. That, of course, did not happen. Many people made a million videos on the subject. I'm personally happy I didn't make any videos because, as you can see, it was kind of like a waste of time. However, I did make a video in May talking about the possibility of Nintendo revealing this new Switch at E3 because these things do happen when things change or when plans change or when developers want their games shown, at E3. That's when that would happen. And that's, of course, what these other people were saying as well, that Bloomberg and some other insiders tried to piggyback that as well and say, yeah, it was coming, before E3. But that, of course, never happened. However, that doesn't mean this new Switch is not coming this year. In fact, there's more indication that it's coming as well. There's other industry veterans during E3 that talked about when they showed the new Mario Rabbids game. They were hinting that that game could actually be running on this new, more powerful Switch. People like Jason Schreier and Imran Khan were heavily hinting that this new Switch was just around the corner and that, basically these games that are being announced for the Switch, they're being shown in a very good, high-res, presentation that they could very well be, in fact, be running on a new, more powerful Switch in those presentations just for demonstration purposes. A lot of people that are in the know, quote-unquote, besides Bloomberg, are now jumping on the bandwagon with this new Switch. People are not doubting it anymore. They're basically saying, yeah, it's coming. There's even people saying that it's already in production. So the whole thing with this new Switch is that we don't know when Nintendo's going to announce it. And just maybe Nintendo themselves is tired of these industry insiders, quote unquote, and reports from Bloomberg that they simply did not announce this new Switch like they thought they would, just so they could mess up the cycle of these people being counted on for having reports and rumors about their own products from Nintendo. Nintendo can announce this new Switch in July and still get it out no problem by November. So this is not an issue really for Nintendo. And if that is the case, it will line up exactly the same with the Nintendo Switch Lite in 2019. They announced it in July and released it in September. Nintendo, if they want more lead-up time, can announce it in July or August or whenever and still release it in plenty of time for the holidays. So that aspect of it having enough time to be announced in 2021 isn't really an issue at this time. However, there is some news that came out on June 14th for the Nintendo Switch and most definitely would be applying to this new, more powerful Switch as well. The company named Next Streaming has confirmed that they are partners now with Nintendo for the Nintendo Switch, and obviously this would be for future Nintendo Switch consoles as well. But they have released their Next Player SDK for the Nintendo Switch, and what this Next Player does is that it allows OTT providers to be able to put their apps on the Nintendo Switch, which would be like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, all these different channels that provide content streaming, VOD video services, can now be put on the Nintendo Switch with very, very little effort, according to this deal with Nintendo that was just approved. Now, Nintendo coming to this agreement one day before E3 with this company for VOD video services like Netflix to be able to be run seamlessly on their console, even though it hasn't been announced yet for these services to be approved yet for the Switch. It makes perfect sense for the timing of it because obviously this new Switch will probably have faster memory and a lot more storage space to be able to hold a lot more apps like these other consoles like the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, PS4, Xbox One, who had all these standard apps. And the Switch is 4.5 years old now or so, and the console basically doesn't have any VOD video services besides just a couple, but They aren't the main ones like Netflix. So we have to be realistic here. For Nintendo to be doing this 4.5 years or so after the Switch came out just now, when they could have been doing this years ago, no problem, begs the question, are they doing this because of the new Switch hardware coming out very soon? The indication that I'm feeling is that yes, they are. And this applies also to their online services, which has been improving for their online gaming basically since they released Monster Hunter. Their online stack, quote unquote, has been improving to allow for a more seamless play for more players in these online games in 2021. A lot of these things are, happening at the same time for Nintendo, along with reports of this new Switch coming. And then on top of that, we already have physical evidence of this new Switch existing on Nintendo's own firmware of the Switch, and this console even has a code name on the firmware that is totally different from any of the other Nintendo Switch code names that are also on the firmware, basically. So this new Switch is real. It's physically actually real. It's like a fact. So at this point, I'll just be honest with you, I think it's more about when Nintendo is going to announce it, not if. And it looks like if all these reports and, lots and lots and lots of people now all chiming in saying the same thing, if all these things are to be believed, then this new Switch will probably be announced within the next few weeks to a month. It's just my guess. So we will have to wait and see, but it is an exciting time. There's lots of games coming out. Metroid is really exciting. Metroid Prime 4 is really exciting. And I do think once we see this new Switch, I do think we will actually be seeing Metroid Prime 4 either with it when they show this new Switch or very soon after in a trailer, because like Retro Studios themselves says, they work with Nintendo's cutting edge next generation platforms. So let's wait and see what happens with Metroid Prime 4 as soon as Nintendo shows this new Nintendo Switch. That's one reason why I'm really excited to see this new Switch, guys. Because I really, 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 in my heart of hearts, think that we're going to see Metroid Prime 4 pretty quick after they show that console. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you very soon in the next video. Have a great day.